questions for Unit 13 specifically? Let's jump right into it. How do you guys feel about 13? Good? Good information? All about sources of financing, loan programs that exist that we should be familiar with, regardless of getting a license. Yeah. Whole lot of key terms within that unit. All right, so let's begin. Question 1. Which individual must be state licensed as a mortgage loan originator? Yeah, correct answer is C. Employee of a who works as a loan originator for a mortgage brokerage company that is not federally regulated. Number 2, a commercial bank sold a group of 2,000 mortgages directly to Fannie Mae. This is an example of what? Secondary market activity, where existing loans are sold and resold, if you remember that. Which statement does not apply to Fannie Mae? It's D, because we know it's not a government agency. There's only one that is, and that's Ginnie Mae. Carries the full faith and credit guarantee of the U.S. government. Number 4, the market where loans are created is the what? Primary. Exactly. So that's the difference. Number 5, home equity conversion mortgage, reverse mortgage. I gave you the answer, also known as a HECM. It's designed for people over the age of what? 62. You got it. That's correct. 6, when investors bypass thrift institutions for direct investment elsewhere, this process is called C, disintermediation, term and definition there. 7, which set of maximum standard qualifying ratios is used to qualify a borrower for a VA mortgage loan? Remember it's C because, and that's on your handouts as well. They don't look at the HER, but they look at the TOR, and you have to, well, did I give you the handouts? No, I didn't, did I? It's here. Okay, debt to income ratio. And you'll notice it's in your textbook as well, the chart, but I have some extra copies of stuff. Take the extra copies because, I mean, you could use it to scribble on it. But yes, it's C as in Charlie. Number 8, an FHA loan is A, government insured. VA loans are government what? Guaranteed. Good job. That's the difference. 9, potential FHA borrowers monthly housing expenses 504, total monthly gross income 1,800, total monthly obligations is 648. What's the HER? We know the HER, it's a debt to income ratio. We take your monthly housing expenses divided by your monthly gross income. Well, what's our monthly housing expenses? They share with us within the question. It's 504, isn't it? And you simply divide it by your monthly gross income, which is 1,800. Did we need the 648? In the question where they said total monthly obligation 648? No. We would need that information if we were calculating the TOR, but they're asking us for the HER, and when you do the math, you get 0.28, which is same thing as 28%. And does that match up with one of our choices, 28%? A is an alpha. Any questions here? So you take 504 divided by 1,800. 10, in a fixed rate amortized mortgage, a portion of the monthly payment that goes towards reducing the principal, what happens with that? It is B, gradually increases with each payment throughout the duration of the loan term. Remember, your monthly mortgage loan payment consists of those two parts, principal and interest, right? In the beginning of the loan term, the majority of your payment goes towards interest, the lesser portion towards principal, towards killing the loan, but principal increases, and that's what they're describing here, while interest decreases. Number 11, which characteristic applies to both FHA and VA loans? Both of them are assumable because they do not contain what clause? The due on sale clause. You got it. 12, which characteristic applies specifically to VA loans? It's D, funding fee is charged, also known as a user fee. Yes, helps the government offset the cost of foreclosures, which is damn near same thing as mortgage insurance, but they describe it as something different. And no, they don't charge mortgage insurance, but anyhow. If you want to get a loan to purchase both real and personal property, what type of loan would you obtain? Package, B as in Bravo. So I just paraphrased. Number 13. 14, a new mortgage accepted by the seller as part of the purchase price is A. Purchase money mortgage, also known as seller financing. Same thing as seller financing. Owner financing, same difference. 15, which protected class is covered under ACOA? What'd you get? It's D as in Delta. Now, ACOA was implemented by the Fed under regulation what letter? B. It's all about being equal. Yes, be equal. The TILA, what? C, requires disclosure of finance charges as well as annual percentage rates of interest. The Truth in Lending You Money Act, implemented by the Fed under regulation what? Z. TILA, the Godzilla will help you remember. Then we come to 17. Which regulation is not covered under RESPA? Bait and switch. C is in Charlie, because bait and switch is covered under TILA, not RESPA. And RESPA was implemented by the Fed under regulation what letter? X. REXPA will help you remember. 18, the TILA-RESPA integrated disclosure rule requires that the borrower be provided which item at least 3 business days prior to the closing. Closing disclosure, A is in alpha, you got it. 19, as part of preparation for a closing, a broker referred a property owner to an appraiser. The appraiser completed the appraisal, charged the owner $250, which was entered on the closing disclosure. The appraiser gave the listing broker $50 for the referral, which the broker accepted. According to RESPA, C, both are in violation because of the incentive that was given and that referral incentive that was received. And we know RESPA strictly prohibits that. The TILA's right of rescission does not apply to which type of loan? B as in Bravo, bank loan used to purchase a home or construct a new home. Any questions here? All right. Okay, 15. Number 1. Shout out what you got as your answer. Number 1. D as in Delta. 2. B. It's B as in Bravo. 3. D. Yes, D as in Delta. 4. C. It is C as in Charlie. 5. D. D as in Delta. 6. C. Yes, C as in Charlie. 7. B. B as in Bravo. That's correct. 8. It's B as in Bravo. 9 is C as in Charlie. And 10, D as in Delta. Good job. All right, I want to focus on what we need to cover in our session for today. We're actually going to cover units 14 and 18 today. Units 14 and 18. I have some handouts for you guys. And I also just provided the rest of the handouts that you'll need for the remainder of the course. So that's for you. That's for you. Second. There we go. There you go. And these are extra copies. So listen, once again, take the extra copies. Take the extra copies because it's useful. You can practice with them later on. When you're going through the practice questions, you want to have it with fresh eyes. You don't want to have all the notes, so that way you can challenge yourself. They're there. But we're going to start with 14. I teach Unit 14 a little unconventionally. We're going to use the handouts for Unit 14. I made these handouts for you to simplify the math that you're going to be tested on for your exams. you look in the book, might be a little bit different. So they take my advice up to a certain degree. Okay. I try to simplify as much as possible, but it really depends on who is the author of the book. I'm an editor of the book. So we're going to actually go to the end of Unit 14. Unit 14 is all about math. Today is our math day. You have these PDFs, by the way. Yeah, under the materials tab, you have the PDFs, which gives you the highlights, the specific questions you're going to be tested on. Well, I mean, it's not questions, but the content you're going to be tested on for your final exam. And then you can use that to mark up your textbook. But for now, we're going to jump right into our session. Unit 14, we're going to start at the back of 14 with the exam. This is page, what, 349? Yeah, page 349. And we're actually going to look at one of those handouts I provided to you to understand some basic math skills, math basics. This should be in front of us. Just provided this to you. Math basics. We're going to jump right into it. Here we go. You'll notice the first few questions for your exam at the end of Unit 14 is mathematical conversions that you need to know to solve these problems. And if this is easy for you, then you can just sit back and relax. But it's converting percentages to fractions, fractions to decimals, and decimals to whatever the case. It doesn't matter. I'm going to show you how it works, the conversions you have to know about. Let's use an example right now that we can work on together. I'll make up my own. And let's say I want you to convert, let's say 20%. 20% into a fraction. How would you do that? Do you remember from school how to convert a percentage into a fraction? Might have been a while since we've been in school, but that's what this time is for, to make sure we're on the same page, to build a solid foundation. Then we can build on top of that. If you remember from school, to convert a percentage into a fraction, we take the percentage, the number, in this case 20, and we place it over what number? Do you remember? You could shout it out. We take 20 and place it over what? 100 would be correct. Is it coming back to us? Might have been a while since we've seen this. If the goal was to convert it into a fraction and that's all they ask, that's a fraction. However, it's not in its what form? Simplest form. So we must simplify. Do you remember how to simplify from school? We have to find the greatest common what? Not denominator, because we're not adding or subtracting fractions to one another. Yes, greatest common factor is what it's called. In other words, what's the biggest number that we can find that can be evenly divided into the numerator, that's the top number of the fraction, as well as evenly divided into the denominator, bottom number of the fraction? What's the largest? 20 is what we're going with. We agree to this? If you said 5, 2, 10, those are all evenly divisible numbers, but it's not the greatest. And if you don't use the greatest, you're going to have to continue simplifying. And I can confirm that, yes, 20 is the greatest. Because 20 can go into 20, let's do the math, evenly how many times? One time, and evenly into 100 how many times? 5 times. 1/5 is its simplest form. And this is most likely how our answer would be displayed if they ask you for a fraction, but they won't. And we know it's much easier to use decimal form than it is fraction. So they will give you a fraction and expect you to know how to convert. Do you know how to convert from fraction into decimal? Let me take you back. Take out your calculators because we're doing math. Cell phone calculator would suffice. They won't allow you to bring any type of scientific calculator with you to the exam. If you bring one, maybe they'll check it, allow you to bring it in, but it has to be basic functionality. No cosines, tangents are needed. It's basic arithmetic. Multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. That's all the functionality you need, which is good news. We're not sending people to the moon here. We're doing real estate math, which is math you're actually going to use. If you take the numerator and simply divide it by the denominator, you get your answer every single time. So what do? Well, you take 1 and divide it by 5, and that gives you your result. It's as simple as that. Take the top number, divide it by the bottom. And what do you get? You get 0.2. Uh-oh, that looks familiar, doesn't it? Similar to the number we started with. And let's go ahead and do that. Let's convert now from a decimal, which is a decimal, back into a percentage. There's 2 ways to do it. Either you can multiply by what number? 100. That's one way to do it. Or you can simply move the decimal. How many spaces? 2 spaces in what direction? To the right. Look up here. We move it 1, 2 spaces. And if you remember from school, your teacher said anytime you're missing something in a space, when you move over the decimal, you add a what? 0. Now it becomes 20. Add the percentage, and we're right back where we started. We just learned how to convert percentage to fraction, fraction to decimal, decimal back to a percentage. And it should be seamless. So you got the hang of it? If I were to ask you to convert from percentage back into decimal, how would you accomplish that? Since we multiply by 100, what do? What's the reverse? We divide by 100. That's one way to do it. So you take 20, divide it by 100, and you get 0.2. It's one way to do it, and it's easier to do math with decimal than it is with percentage. But even easier, you can take the decimal point that's not visible to us. If you remember from school, your teacher said, if you don't see a decimal, there's an invisible decimal that exists to the right of the number. And all you have to do is remember Beyonce. Move it where? To the left, and it becomes 0.2 all over again. Any questions here? All right, now let's get into some basic algebra. Basic algebra. I've already shown you this algebra, which means it shouldn't be intimidating. It's math we've already seen. It's the ABC formula, A times B equals C. And if you know at least 2 of those variables, you can calculate the missing third variable every single time without fail. Doesn't matter which one it is, and I'll show you how it works. As an example, if I said A is 13 times B is going to be our missing variable equals 169, how do we solve for B? Do you remember how to do this? First thing we must do, keyword starts with an I, we must isolate it. Isolate our missing variable by itself on one side of the equation. What side of the equation is it on, the left or the right side? What mathematical symbol separates the equation from the left to the right side to determine which side is? It's the equal symbol. Do you remember this? Equal sign separates your equation. This is the left side of the equation. This is the right. Do you follow so far? And since B is on the left side of the equation and it's not isolated, we have to get rid of something here. Let's go ahead and do that. And all you have to do is remember a rhyme to help you save some time. Simply slide and what? Divide. This is how you get rid of it. Slide to the other side of the equation and divide. So you take 169 divided by what? 13. So that's what B is going to equal. B is isolated now. We got rid of the 13. We moved it over. We divide. And what do you get as your result? 169 divided by 13. It's not a mistake. It is 13 if you know your times tables. 11 times 11. 12 times 12. 144. 169. Okay, anyhow. So here it is. If you want to check your work, do you remember how to check your work? Since B equals 13, all you have to do is substitute it. Substitute it back in the original equation and see if it makes sense. But I can assure you, when you multiply, yes, 13 times 13 equals 169. The square root of 169 is 13. 13 squared, 13 to the second power is 169. If you're using the ABC formula, which is when essentially you have to work backwards to get the answer, you're gonna be missing a component, a variable, and you have to solve for that variable. You're probably wondering, okay, this is all great, and be able to figure this out for exam purposes, but how do I organize the equation? What do I plug into the A, the B, and the C so I can solve accordingly? And that's why you have what's in the red box here. You need to write this down on a separate sheet of paper, drill this in. A is always going to represent the what of something? Precisely. Remember this. A is always going to represent total. The total of something times B, which is always going to represent the what? The rate of something, equals C, which represents your results or part of something. Let me show you how consistent that is with the math that you need to know to solve these problems, including the first calculation we're going to work on together. Let's jump right into it. Y'all ready? All right. If you turn over that handout to the next one, it's going to be sales what? Commish. Yes. This is where it starts getting exciting. This is where you find out how much money you're going to make off of a flipping real estate transaction. When it comes to money, let's be realistic with each other. When it comes to money, you're thinking, Michael, I got it. Okay, you don't need to show me how to calculate how much money I'm going to make. Money is a big part of our lives. We can figure it out. However, I have to show you regardless. And you can see the two types of commission that are typically calculated. One more so than the other, but the formula is still the same, which is good news. And it's an ABC formula, isn't it? And A is always going to represent the total of something. In this case, your total what? Yes. Times B, which is going to represent the rate of something. In this case, your rate of what? Commission. And that gives you your part. Isn't your sales commission part of the total sale? So isn't it consistent to what we wrote down and highlighted on the previous handout? Total times rate equals part. And the most common calculation of sales commission is straight, where you receive or negotiate a straight percentage of commission off of that sale that you completed. That's it. Step commissions, if I can just explain it to you, is where you're paid on different levels or tiers of commission. Have you ever heard of a sales position where, depending on how much sales you have with the company, will earn you a higher percentage of commission? That's it. So it's scaled. It's stepped, right? At different levels. But the formula is still the same. So I'm going to show you straight commission. And you're going to have 2 practice questions with this later on tonight for your homework. Do not skip the exam at the end of the unit in today's session. All right, for your homework. Do not skip. You have to do every single one of those problems. Challenge yourself with it. Get me an answer, right or wrong, doesn't matter. Challenge yourself. Feel frustrated. It's okay. It's the first time you've seen this in a while. I get that. We have to get exposed to it, challenge ourselves with it, and then review it the next day. But if you don't challenge yourself, you're missing that component. It's not going to stick. I gave you some advice for the math portion of your exam, right? As soon as you sit down to take your exam, write down what? All these formulas. First formula you should write down is ABC. It's the most common formula that you need to know, and it's the hardest your math can get. Total times rate equals results or part. Here we go. Let's make up a sale. Let's make it up. Let's say you sold a $4 million property. Is that possible for you to sell a $4 million house? Yeah. Yeah, why not? Agents are doing it all the time. My sister, she just texted me. I helped her get a real estate license, and now she has a blossoming career. She works out of the Tampa area. She just got a $7 million listing. Okay. And that's her highest listing she's got so far. She's had 4 million. She's had 5 million. Now 7 million is the highest. So these are abundant. These are abundant. What, you think agents are not doing this just like you? Once you get your real estate, what sets you apart from them? Oh, experience. I'm not ready to do a multi-million-dollar sale. No, it is a mindset. It's a limiting mindset that we have because we think when we get into the business, we're not capable of bringing value into that type of transaction or having a conversation with somebody who has, a net worth of tens of millions of dollars. Who said? Bigger number. Exactly. So you have to challenge yourself with this, have those conversations, be bold enough, get in those environments where you're surrounded by people who have these types of properties and be able to network with them. Building relationships, number 1. These people with money do business based off of relationships. So build a relationship first, facilitate, cultivate, and go in those environments where you can. Join a local chamber of commerce, join the Rotary Club like I did, join a country club. I know Maybe you don't golf or whatever the case may be. Whatever you can afford. I know because all these things cost money. Go to those free networking meetings, go to those seminars, rub shoulders, rub elbows, right? But do it. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting on you're going to end up a statistic like most new agents that don't do any work and expect the money to just flood in. I've seen so many success stories. I had this young guy. He was ready to quit, and I told him stick with it, and he stuck with it. I guess my words were motivational enough. He passed on his first attempt for his state exam. Thought he was going to fail. Didn't know what he was going to do, and then right out the gate, he got a motel to sell. A motel, okay? Out of all things, I mean, just I taught this woman. She was living out of her car, and her kids got taken away from her because child services found out that she was living out of her vehicle, and she was in desperate need of getting her kids back. Somebody sponsored her to take this class. She took the class, got her license, took it serious right out the gate, started working in timeshare, and absolutely crushed. Got her kids back immediately, got her own place, got out of her vehicle. I mean, seeing those 180 stories and those success stories in people's lives, it's abundant in this business because of what this business represents and how much money is involved in this business. Our current president is a real estate guy. Built his wealth off of real estate. I don't know. Just think about the possibilities. Anyhow. All right, $4 million transaction. Let's just say you negotiate 6%. And you do the math, what do you get? $240,000 commission. Total commission. Total commission. How it used to work is the listing agent would do the negotiation, but on behalf of their brokerage, and would negotiate that 6%, but with anticipation that they're going to split it with the buyer side. It's not required now. The buyer is supposed to get their commission from the buyer. Buyer's agent is supposed to get it from the buyer. You understand? And not rely on the listing agent to split. But let's just say, hypothetically, the seller agrees to pay both sides. And 6% total commission. Let's go ahead and see how that split works. $240,000. This is not the end of the story. We take that. And what do you think is a fair split between both brokers working the deal? 50-50. Right down the middle. So multiply by 50%. And what's half? 120,000? We're not done. Because who's doing all the work, the broker or the associate? Typically you, the associate. So what do you think is a fair split between the brokerage and you, the associate? Give me a split. Out of 100%. 80-20, why not? So you get 80% and the brokerage gets 20%. What's 80%? Isn't that like 90 something? $96,000. Let me ask you a question. Is $96,000 a good day?
To live off of that for like a week, maybe.
Is it a good day?
Very good. Yeah.
It's a good multiple years for people. What does the average teacher make in a year?
44.
I would say like 40 after benefits and everything. Could be more. Probably it's going to be more in the future, all this stimulus and everything, and I'm glad. Teachers should get paid more. More than double what an average teacher makes in an entire year, and you just made it off of one transaction. Why can't you do this? You think there's not $4 million properties all over the place? Go to my neighborhood right here. Multi-million-dollar properties. My neighbor, Carrot Top. My neighbor, Doc Rivers, coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. All right, I'm telling you, tens of millions of dollars, these homes. Obviously, they're a little bit nicer than mine, but multi-million-dollar properties on a lake, the best lake in Central Florida, in my opinion. And then Windermere, Winter Garden, you see $4 million properties. You see $4 million properties in Point Siena. And you'll see $4 million properties all over the place. Kissimmee, Orlando, all over Central Florida, all over the state. And real estate agents are doing these deals. So why can't you?
If it was a million, you'd still be making 24 even, but there's a lot more $1 million properties.
What if you represent both sides as a transaction broker and make a commission off of both sides? Then double it. Instead of 96, double it. Just think about that. I mean, wow. Let's move on to our next handout. One of my personal favorites. It's profit or what? Or loss. This is used to calculate how much of a profit you made when you sold something or how much of a loss you took when you sold something. Or you can do your math backwards and the investor says, I want to make a certain amount of profit on the sale. And then you determine how much to sell it for to make that profit or to hit that number, their goal. It's very useful and it could be used for anything, not just property. I mean, real property could be used for personal property as well. Collectibles, anybody a collector? I'm a collector. Anybody? No, not a collector. I love sports memorabilia. I love sports memorabilia, but I also collected like coins, currency. I collected cards and so forth. Now I collect like signatures and from athletes. So I love doing that. And hopefully I can get my sons on that. I think my sons are collectors as well. They love Pokemon cards. And I told them, hey, listen, you got to take care of this card, all right? Because in 20, 25 years, this Pokemon card could be worth a lot of money. And they're like, okay, yeah, Dad. All right. And they put it in a sleeve. They put it in a binder and all this stuff. It's like, okay, they're going to be collectors. I like it. And yeah, now I want to be a collector of real estate. And I'm pretty sure so do you. But it's the ABC formula. Do you see it? A is always going to represent the total of something. In this case, your total what? Costs times B, which represents the rate of something. In this case, your rate of return on the sale. I'll show you how that works. Equals the sale price. This is how it works. If you know what you paid for something or what you sold it for, we can always calculate the rate of return. We then use rate of return on the sale to figure out how much profit or how much of a loss you took. So does somebody in here have an example of something they sold? Could be anything and made a decent amount of profit on it. Could be anything. I know you sold something during the pandy, right? When prices for everything went up. You had all of that workout equipment in your garage. People are selling it for crazy money. You sold a few. Okay. What'd you pay for it?
I honestly picked up half of it as garbage on the side of the road, so a lot of it was free. So
What money did you spend to refurbish it?
so probably around $60
$60. What did you sell this furniture for?
altogether, like 600.
$600. Is that a profit?
That's a good profit.
Okay. So now we get to find out how much of a profit. Let's do the math. What do we do first? We isolate. We're isolating our missing variable, in this case, rate of return. We get rid of everything else. Look, I already showed you the motion I depicted. Slide and divide. And you take the sale price of 600 divided by the total cost, what he paid, which was $60, and his rate of return. Do the math. Take 600 divided by 60, and what do you get? You get 10. All right, here's the thing, though. It is 10. It's a whole number. But rate of return, even as a whole number, is expressed as a what? Percentage. So you have to convert this to a percentage. And how do we convert to a percentage? You can multiply by 100. Or you can move the decimal 2 spaces to the right. And yes, it does become 1,000% rate of return. 1,000% rate of return. Sounds like a good business. You should obviously keep on doing it whenever you find those pieces of furniture. Yes. I mean, you drive around here, these people give away all kinds of valuable things. I mean, working appliances that they just don't want and they're trying to upgrade.
Estate sales. But I've made a killing. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes. Yeah. But we're not done yet. This is just Dawson's rate of return. We have to complete one more step to figure out his actual profit. And that's what we have here. The rate of return was what? 1,000%. And before you can start to make profit as an investor, you have to at least break what? Which is getting how much percent of your money back? Did he get at least 100% of his money back? So subtract it. And his actual profit is 900%. Great job. Do it more. Any questions here? You understand how it works? Let me give you another example. Actually, you give me an example. Something you sold and took a loss on. Everybody has taken a loss on something. Raise your hand. Somebody new. Yes? Give me an example. Okay. What'd you pay for this house? 140,000. And what did you sell it for? I want a loss. I mean, after closing costs and commissions and so forth, maybe it was a little bit of a loss. I get that, but let's use an example. Does anybody have another example? Besides Dawson, I want to get somebody else to participate. Something you lost, something you sold and took a loss on, a laptop, electronics, traded in your cell phone, sold books back to the college. I mean, come on, give me an example. Cisco, give me an example. School books. Okay, give me a real example. How much did you pay for all these school books? $500. And what did you sell it for? 25? All right, we could use that. Why not? It's the same steps, guys. We first have to isolate our rate of return. That's what we're trying to solve for. That's our missing variable. So isolate, get rid of everything else. In this case, the 500, slide and divide. You take 50, which is the sale price, what he sold it for, divide it by the total cost, 500. And what do you get? You get point what? 0.1, which is how much as a percent? All you have to do is move, you can multiply by 100 or move the decimal 2 spaces to the right. And yes, exactly. You'll end up with 10%. So 10% rate of return. He got 10% of his money back. That's what it means. You understand rate of return now? He didn't break even. Breaking even is getting how much percent of your money back? 100. He didn't break even. He only got 10% of his money back. So you can easily figure out the loss, right? 100% is breaking even. His rate of return was 10%. How much did he lose? What percent? 90%. Are you with me? You understand how it works? Let me give you an example. It's the hardest question that you have for your homework that I would normally give you to challenge yourself with independently, but let's do it in class. I want you to work through it, try to get an answer, give you about a 3-minute head start, and then we'll go through it together. Just try to give me an answer. Try your best. Doesn't matter. Go through the motions. And it's the last question, I believe. Oh, no, it's number 14. Number 14. Let me read this out to you. And I'll paraphrase a little bit. A man took a 20% loss when he sold tract A for $100,000. He paid $200,000 for tract B. What must he sell B for to recover what he lost in tract A, but also make a 20% profit when he sells tract B? Go ahead. Set a timer for 3 minutes.
3 minutes starting now.
About 10 seconds. Okay, time. Let me read this out again. A man took a 20% loss when he sold tract A for $100,000. He paid $200,000 for tract B. What does he have to sell B for to recover his loss from tract A, but also to make a 20% profit when he sells tract B? Let's start with tract A. First of all, it's the profit or loss formula. We know that, which is what? Your total cost times the rate of return equals the total sale price. Correct? And let's start with tract A, fill in all the information that we know about tract A, then we'll work on tract B for the goals that he wants to accomplish. So tract A, what did he pay for tract A? Do we know? No, we don't know. Because we know what he sold it for. He sold it for $100,000. His total cost, what he paid for it, is a mystery. That's going to be our mystery. They indirectly give us the rate of return. If 100% is breaking even, and he took a 20% loss, what was the rate of return? The rate of return, he only got how much percent of his money back? Do you understand how we got that number? Look, he took a 20% loss when he sold tract A, but we know we have to fill in the rate of return. Well, 100% is breaking even. He took a 20% loss, which means he only got 80% of his money back. He fell short on tract A. And that's the number we need to plug in to do the math properly. And what did he sell it for? He sold it for $100,000. Now we have everything we need to solve for our missing variable, in this case, the cost, what he paid for tract A. Isolate. Get rid of everything else on this side of the equation. In this case, what must we get rid of? The 80%, right? Because the equal sign separates the equation. So we have to get rid of the 80%. How do you get rid of it? You slide and divide. So you take 100,000 divided by 0.8. It's the same thing as 80%, correct? And when you do the math, you'll find out what the cost is, what he paid for tract A, which is what? Do the math. Take 100,000 divided by 0.8. Tell me what you get. $125,000. Everything is known for tract A. There's nothing that's a mystery. We need to fill in those blanks so we can move on to tract B to help him accomplish his goals. Tract B. He wants to recover what he lost in tract A, but also make a 20% profit. Last time I checked, this is the profit or loss formula. So let's start with that 20% profit he wants to make first, and then we'll focus on the loss that he wants to recover from tract A. So tract B, what did he pay for tract B? They tell us in the question. $200,000. That's the cost, right? How do we represent him making a 20% profit when he sells tract B? Well, he not only has to break even, which is getting how much percent of your money back? Yes, he wants to make how much percent profit on top of that? 20% profit. So how do we represent that as a rate of return? Do you understand how we got that number? 120% rate of return. Go ahead and do the math. So we can find out what a 20% profit would be as a dollar figure. You take 200,000, multiply it by 1.2. That's the same thing in decimal form. And tell me what you get. 240,000? All right, so that was what he needs to sell it for, the price, just to make the 20% profit. Do you see the 20% profit here? But he also wants to recover what he lost from tract A. And that's where we need to focus on the information that we had to fill in. Let me show you what that looks like. He paid and what? $25,000 for track day, but he sold it for how much? 100,000. So what does he need to recover from track day? How much money? $25,000. Recovery, right? Oops. And that means he needs to sell it for what to accomplish both goals? He needs to sell it for $265,000. Is that one of our choices? Correct answer is B as in Bravo. Do you understand why? Now, the common mistake is taking the 20% loss from track day and adding it onto here and then doing your math. That would be an incorrect assumption because, listen, just pay attention up here real quick. Is 20% on 125,000 the same thing as 20% of 200,000? No, so you can't slap percentages onto different dollar figures. It's not mathematically, it doesn't work. That's why we use the dollar figure he lost from track day. And that's what he needs to recover. And that's why we needed to fill in the information for track day. Any questions here? This is the hardest math question, but there's a reason why we did it in class. Let's take a break. Let's be back at 10:05. 10:05. Stretch out, grab a snack, make a phone call. Do what you got to do. Be ready to rock and roll.
In an era where online education often falls short, there's an oasis transforming the digital learning landscape. Welcome to Cameron Academy. With our AI-powered platform, we're not just changing the game, we're rewriting the rules. At Cameron Academy, we're not just elevating education, we're lifting learners to new heights. Our comprehensive video lessons and AI tutors simplify complex real estate concepts. At Cameron Academy, we do more than prepare you for your exams. We equip you with the essential knowledge for a successful career in real estate. Break away from the traditional. Think computerized exams, a convenient study app at your fingertips, and AI support, but wait, that's not all. Live chat support when you need it, AI-driven text-to-speech content, your own personal AI tutor, and instant online certifications. This isn't just education. This is the future. We're reimagining what it means to ascend to success in the real estate industry. Choose Cameron Academy, the oasis of innovative learning. Your journey to success starts here.
Okay, let's continue. Next handout that I want you to focus on is a proration calculation. Doesn't this say proration of property taxes, unpaid property taxes? Proration of monthly rent and prorating interest on an assumed mortgage.
Yep.
It's 3 proration calculations that we're going to focus on specifically. And we're going to start with proration of property taxes. All right. When it comes to prorating, anytime you, real quick, if I can get your attention, anytime you use a proration calculation, it's all about promoting fairness. If I didn't show you how to do this calculation, you can figure it out on your own. That's how simple this is. For instance, is it fair for you to pay the whole year's worth of property taxes if you became the owner in the middle of the year? No. So for that reason, we prorate to find out what is fair. Is it fair for you to pay the whole month's worth of rent if you move into that apartment in the middle of the month? No. So we prorate for that reason to determine what is fair. Let's start with unpaid property taxes. The first step always when doing a proration calculation, you'll see it in red, calculate the daily what? That's going to be consistent on every single proration calculation. That is the first step always. Calculate the daily rate. Whether it's monthly, get it to daily. If it's yearly, get it to daily. And that's exactly what property taxes are, right? They're paid on an annual basis. Your annual amount of property taxes, let's make it up. Let's say you're paying $36,000. Actually, $36,500. That's your annual property taxes. How do we get from annual to daily? From annual to daily, we divide by the number of days in the what? The year. And typically, you're going to use a 365-day method, non-leap year. And they'll tell you in the question. If it's leap year, there's 1 additional day in the year, but they'll tell you. They'll say 365-day method, non-leap year. You'll see it for your practice questions later on tonight. But let's assume it's the most common method, 365-day method. Do the math and tell me what you get. What's your daily rate? $100? Is that right? $100. We need that for step number 2. But before we get into step number 2, we need to establish what the closing date is. So we determine who's responsible for what amounts. The owner of the property has owned for a certain time within the year, and the buyer is going to take over the responsibility to pay property taxes within a portion of that year. The closing date will determine when ownership changes and who's responsible for what. I'll make it up just to see how it works. Let's say the closing date is May the 4th. May the 4th? Okay, all right. We got nerds in here. I'm not the only one. All right, so in the question, they'll tell you also, not just a closing date, they have to give it to you. I made it up so we can see how it works. They have to tell you who the day belongs to. This is important. This is relevant. But I'll make it up just to see how it works. Let's say the day of the closing belongs to the buyer. I'll show you why that's relevant in just a moment. Let's move on to step number 2. You take the daily rate and multiply it by the days the seller owns the property within the year before ownership changes and the buyer becomes responsible for property taxes after that. Well, you have to know how many days are in each month to tally, to add all of these figures up. And if you skipped along in life without remembering the number of days in each month, I hate to break it to you, but you can't bring a calendar with you to the state exam. You have to memorize how many days are in each month. And if it's been a while since we've heard the rhyme, we're not going to use the rhyme. We're going to use something called the knuckle method. If you remember the knuckle method, great. It's very elementary. I am ashamed to say that I learned the knuckle method after high school. And I can't even believe how simple it was right in front of me the entire time to know how many days are in each month based on the knuckles. Take your knuckles out, put them in front of you, and this is how simple it is. Since you're looking at me, I'll start here. You start on the knuckle, you go on the knuckle, and then in between the knuckle with your counting, months in the year. If you're on the knuckle, which is what we're going to start with, the first month in the year is what? January. On the knuckle, 31 days. In between, 30. There's only one exception. February is the only month that has 28 days. And that's it. The rest work. You continue on. That's it. That's the knuckle method. I'll show you. January on the knuckle, 31. February, 28. Back on the knuckle. March, 31. April now. In between the knuckle, 30. May, back on the knuckle, 31. You understand? June, in between, 30. July, on the knuckle, 31. And you go into the next set of knuckles, and it works because July and August are the only back-to-back months that have 31 days. You continue on till you run out of months, not before you run out of knuckles, hopefully. You understand what I'm saying? That's it. That's all you need. And they can't deny you from bringing your knuckles to take the state exam. Yeah. Anyhow, so here we go. How many days in January? And then you add February, 28 non-leap year, I said. And then March, 31, April, 30. And May, remember, the closing date is in May, so it's not the full month. The closing date is May 4th, but the day belongs to who? The buyer. Our goal is to figure out how many days the seller owned the property, because we want to make sure we hold the seller accountable what they need to pay for property taxes based on how long they own within the year, which means the seller stopped owning on May 3rd, because on the 4th, the buyer takes responsibility for property taxes. And if you add all of those figures together, tell me what you get. So 123?
Yeah.
123 days? Everybody concur with this? And we need to use that for our calculation. Our daily rate is $100 times 123 days. And what amount is a seller responsible for in property taxes? When you multiply, you get $12,300. Out of that $36,500 bill, that's what the seller is responsible for. Now, this amount is going to show up as a closing expense, which is broken down on your closing disclosure. Do you remember the CD? Based on TRID, TILA, RESPA integrated disclosure, you need to receive the exact closing costs at least 3 business days before the closing. This amount is going to be displayed there. But how is it going to be displayed? Well, you're going to see amounts that are credited and debited to the seller and amounts that are credited and debited to the buyer. What is a credit and debit? That's a better question. Credits, I'll make it even simpler for you. Credits are happy faces. Debits are what?
We don't like being like that.
Frowny faces. You want to receive a credit when you're closing on the property. You want dollar amounts to be credited to you. Debits are amounts taken away from you. So how is that $12,300 going to show up? Who's responsible for the $12,300? The buyer or the seller? The seller, based on how long they own the property within the year. So you're taking that away from the seller. What is that? A credit or a debit? It's a debit to the seller and simultaneously a credit to the buyer. So it's going to show up in the credit column for the buyer. Because at the end of the year, no matter who the owner is, they are responsible for the entire property tax bill. It's true. You want to make sure at the closing, the seller paid their share, so that way you're not stuck with the whole bill. And title companies, lawyers that provide closing services, they do this math to determine that. Now, let's move on to the next type of proration calculation. It's prorating prepaid monthly rent. It's not what you think. It's not the example I provided, moving into an apartment in the middle of the month. It's when you're selling rental property. income producing property. Can I give you an example? Real quick, if I can give you an example. Let's just say I'm selling you my rental property. I have tenants inside. On the first of every month, what are they paying? They're paying rent. But then I sell you that same property in the middle of the month. You're thinking, okay, well, part of that rent you collected is mine. Because I own the property for part of the month. I should get part of that rent. That's all this is. If I didn't show you how to do this, you could figure it out on your own. Might take you a little bit of time to navigate it, but you can figure it out on your own. I just organize it in a way that makes it easy for you. Obviously, you can't bring these formulas into the testing room, but you can study to the point where they make you put your belongings away. What's always the first step when doing a proration calculation? Calculate the daily what? All right, in this case, the daily rate of rent, but I'm going to make it up. So let's create a hypothetical. Let's say I have a quadruplex, which is how many units? And each tenant is paying me $1,500. So that means, what am I collecting total from all the tenants on the first of every month? $6,000. This is our example. $6,000. But I sold you that rental property. I'm going to make this up as well. Let's say November 15th. And before we said the day belongs to the buyer, let's say it belongs to the seller. We're switching it up just to see how it works. Let's go through the steps now. This is the information that we need. This is all we need. How do we get from monthly to daily? We know what the first step is. Always calculate the daily rate. Well, you have to divide by the number of days in the what? Yeah, well, what month are we in? We're in November, guys. That's been established. How many days in November? Aren't there 30 days in November? Tell me what you get. What's the daily rate? Divide. You get what? $200. $200 per day. What do? You take 6,000, the total rent collected, divided by the number of days in that month, in the closing month. So take 6,000 divided by 30, and you get 200, right? We're going to need that for step number 2. And what do we do in step number 2? Take the daily rate and multiply it by the days the buyer owned the property in the closing month. How do you figure this out? You start on the closing date and add up the total number of days until the end of the month. And don't be afraid to tally, okay? Nothing embarrassing about that. Here it is. When is the day of the closing? It's November 15th, but the day belongs to who? The seller. So when does the buyer actually start owning and getting credit for that income? On the 16th. So you start on the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, all the way to the end of the month. How many days in November, guys? So let's tally. 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. There's 30 days in the month. So what is that? 555 is what? 15 days. $200 per day. Isn't 15 half of 30? So shouldn't you get half of the rent? What's half of 6,000? It just works out in this example, but it's not always going to be exactly the middle of the month. Anyhow, you do the math. Take 200, multiply by 15, and you still get $3,000. And how is this going to show up on your closing disclosure? Well, the seller already has this in their bank account. They collected it from all the tenants on the first of every month. So you're going to take away from the seller and simultaneously credit the what? Credit the buyer. The buyer gets credit $3,000 for that month's rent because of how long they own that rental property in that month. Are you with me on this? Do you have any questions on this? Did I lose anybody on this? Question?
15 belongs to the seller.
You start on the 16th. Add starting on the 16th, and that's exactly what I did here. Just tally. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Some people think, okay, isn't it 14 or whatever? No, you start on the 16th. When you start on the 16th, you get 15.
No, but we
Any
still
questions?
hire 60.
Yes, exactly. Any questions here? All right, let's move on to prorating interest on an assumed mortgage. Could debts be assumed by another borrower?
Yes.
Could they? Is it possible? Yes. As long as there's not a what clause? Due on sale clause. Do you remember the due on sale clause? Okay. But if that debt is going to be assumed by another borrower, we have to address who's responsible for the interest that has to be paid to a lender within the month. If you sell that property within the middle of the month, each party is responsible for a certain amount of interest on that loan within that closing month. That's what's being addressed here. That's what we're calculating. And this is how you figure it out. You start with the loan balance. You always get the daily rate. It's always the first step, but this is how you figure it out. Take the loan balance. Let's use an example in the book. It's the last question, question 20. I'll read this out to you. The closing date is August 27th. The buyer is assuming the seller's mortgage loan that has a principal balance of $242,500 at 4% interest. The day of the closing belongs to the buyer. You see they identify. What is the proration and how is the amount going to be entered on the closing disclosure? So what's the loan balance? $242,500. What's the interest rate? Because that's what you have to multiply by. Go ahead and do the math. Was it like 9,700? If I'm not mistaken.
97.
If you do the math, you take 242,500 multiplied by 4%, you should get $9,700. That's the annual amount of interest paid. But we need daily. So how do you get from annual to daily? Divide by the number of days in the what? In the year, and tell me what you get. We're not going to round. That's it. I want you to write this down at the top of your handouts for proration. Don't round until you get to the end, because your answer is going to be off if you round beforehand. You're not done with your calculation. Once you're done with your calculation, then you can round to the nearest cent. We're rounding at the end. So you get 20,
5, 7, 5, 3, 4.
20, we could use 4 spaces after the decimal. So you said 5,
7, 5,
5, 7, 5, 3. Okay, we'll leave that. And whatever's in your calculator, just keep it there. We're going to need it. But I'm using, 4 spaces after the decimal, just to save a little bit of space. All right, we're going to need that for step number 2, but let's identify what the closing date is. It's August what? 27th? And the day belongs to who? They say the buyer, right? In the question? They have to identify that within the question. So take the daily rate now and multiply it by the days the seller owns the property in the closing month. And that's from the 1st of the month, the 1st of August, until the closing date. But the closing date belongs to who? You got to look up here. Closing date belongs to who? The buyer. So when does the seller actually stop owning and being responsible for that debt obligation? The day prior. Because then the buyer on the 27th becomes responsible for that debt from that point and the interest for that debt from that point on. So the seller stops becoming responsible on the 26th day of August. So 26 days times this daily rate. Tell me what you get. Now you can round. Maybe we miscalculated here. Let me just, okay. I'll do it on the sheet here. So take a look. We take 9,700 and we divide it by 365. We get, it's 26.5753. Sorry, I put 25 for whatever reason. I didn't do the calculation. I was just relying on you guys, but it's okay. We're off by $1. Now you multiply by 26, and this is the amount. you get. This is the correct amount. So it's 26. And yes, when you do the math, you get 690. And now you can round to the nearest cent, 96 cents. Credit to the buyer, debit to the seller. Does that reflect one of our answers, one of our choices here? If you go back to your textbook, you'll see. You have to know credits and debits. So it's D as in Delta. You understand why? It's going to be debit to the seller, credit to the buyer. That's your complete answer. Any questions here? All right. Let's move on. I want us to move on to state taxes related to the finance and purchase of real property. This is the handout I want you to have in front of you. Pull it up. Actually, I feel like I should show you something else first. I'm going to show you this first. Pull up this handout, calculating property taxes. This is unit 18, which is today, but let's cover it right now because this is going to help us with understanding state taxes related to the finance and purchase of real property. So pull up calculating property taxes. You should understand how your property taxes are calculated. What shows up on your property tax bill, understanding that your tax bill is typically composed of 3 parts: city, county, and what? School board taxes. Have you seen this on your tax bill? Have you looked at it? You were probably confused as to how they made the calculations. Now I can reveal to you what's really going on so you can be a more informed consumer, homeowner. They make it confusing so you don't complain and you just pay what's owed, okay? But I'll show you how it works. How do you calculate your property taxes? You take the assessed value of your property. Who determines the assessed value of your property every single year for tax purposes? The county. The county property appraiser every single year establishes what the assessed value of your property is. It's not what your property is worth. It's not what you're going to sell it for in the current market. It's what they're going to charge you taxes on. And you multiply that by a tax rate, which is expressed in mills. I'll explain that in just a moment. And that gives you the property taxes that you owe. Understanding millage rates. They call them mills for short. Tax rates are expressed in what? Which is 1,000th of a what? Which you would write in decimal form as 0.001. You see it's in the 1,000th place, decimal place. It's 1,000th of a dollar is what it is. All you have to do to remember how to convert mills to its true decimal form so you can do the math is remember that mil is Latin for what? Isn't that used in several other languages? I know it's in Spanish, Latin, of course, French, even. You can attest to that, right, Tamar? Yes, Italian as well. Mil, Portuguese. Mil means 1,000. And this will help you understand how to convert mills, which is part of our calculation. You take whatever the mills are and you divide by what? Divide by mil, which is 1,000, and you get the true tax rate. But the tax rate is different depending on the city, county, and school board your property is located within. It's a geographic determination. But even if you live in the richest city, you're part of the most expensive county and the most prestigious school board, they can't charge you any more than how many mills each? What's the maximum? No more than 10 mills each. I'll make it up just so you can see how it works, if you're with me real quick. Let's say $400,000 is the assessed value. I'm making this up. This is going to get plugged into all three. It's going to be the same. But once again, depending on the city, county, and school board you're a part of will dictate what the mill rate is, the millage rate. But we have to convert and then multiply. Look, it's ABC. Do you see A times B equals C? and then we add, and that's going to be our total tax bill. You'll see how it works. Let's go straight to the top. Let's say the maximum is what they're charging you for city, which is how many mills? It's 10 mills, which if you want to convert it, you divide by what? 1,000, and you get the true decimal form, which is what? It's going to be 0.01. Take 10 divided by 1,000, you get 0.01. Okay, let's move on. Let's say for county, I'm making these up, but they'll tell you in the question. You have to know what to do with this information. Let's say 5 mills is what they're charging you for a county. Divide by what? 1,000, and you get 0.005. And then for a school board, let's say 2.5 mills. You divide by what number? 1,000, and you get 0.0025. Now what do? We multiply. Go ahead, take 400,000, multiply, and what do you get? You get 4,000, right? And then for county, you get 2,000. And then for a school board, you get 1,000. And the question is, what's your total property tax bill? Which is what? It's going to be $7,000. $7,000. That's what I pay. Anyhow, $7,000. And that would be your answer. The hardest part to this is converting the mills. Once you get the hang of it, just remember, divide by 1,000. You got it every single time. Okay. Why do we need to know that? Well, it's because of what we see on this handout. State taxes related to the finance and purchase of real property. Taxes again, but not county or city, not local taxes, but state taxes now. Florida. And it's ABC. You might not know this, but I need your attention real quick. Anytime you create a new loan in the state of Florida, you have to pay 2 separate state taxes when you create a new loan in the state of Florida. This is the rule. The state wants to get their share. Not only do you have to pay, look up here, the what type of tax starts with an I? Intangible tax, which is specifically, look up here on what type of loans? New loans. But new loans get taxed how many times? 2 times, 2x. And you'll see that here. The next tax is a documentary stamp tax on the promissory note. Call it a doc stamp tax. And that's on what type of loans? Which include new and what? Existing. Okay. And then you take, if you're selling a property, when you transfer a deed, you have to pay state taxes for transfer of that deed. And that's called the documentary stamp tax on the deed. And the way to calculate that is based off the purchase price. They have to give you this information, of course, within the exam. But what they don't provide to you are these mill rates. These rates do not change. It's always the same rates. I'll give you a simple way to help you memorize these rates. But for now, you do have to dedicate somehow these rates to memory. You're going to be tested on that. Okay? Now, when there's something unique specifically about stamp taxes. There's something unique specifically about stamp taxes. And you'll see that here. When calculating stamp taxes, any amount less than $100 must be rounded up to what? $100. Any amount less than $100 must be rounded up to $100. Are you with me on this? Why? Well, the state of Florida says we can't charge you taxes on anything less than a $100 bill. So they say, go ahead and round it up to 100 so we can charge you taxes on it, even if it's 1 penny. rounded up to 100 so we could charge taxes on it. Let me show you how it works so you can get a feel for it. Let's say you create a new loan of 100,000 and 1 penny. Remember, for new loans, you have to pay how many taxes? 2 taxes. Not only the intangible tax, but also the tax on all loans, which include new and existing. So for intangible tax, look up here. Is this a stamp tax? Is the intangible tax? No, these last two are stamp taxes. So when you have this amount, you don't have to do anything with it. You can just multiply across. But when you plug it in here to get taxed for the second time, what happens to this 1 penny? It changes, doesn't it? Exactly. This is a documentary stamp tax on the promissory note. And anything less than $100 for stamp taxes must be rounded up to $100. So does this amount change? Yes. It turns into $100,000, $100. Oops. And that's the amount you're going to use for your calculation. Do you understand how it works? Even if it's 1 penny, that 1 penny has to be rounded up to 100. It's not how you normally round if you remember from school. You're thinking, if I'm rounding up to 100, isn't it $50 and up? Not in this case. Once again, because the state of Florida says we can't charge you taxes on anything less than $100, so go ahead and round it up to $100 so we can charge you taxes on it. Let's go through 2 examples together to see how it works. 2 examples. Number 10, a buyer has agreed to pay state taxes associated with a new second mortgage loan of $31,000. What are the total costs? Number 10. Let's see right here. A buyer has agreed. Let's do the math. Do we have a new loan? Yes. Of how much? $31,000, correct? For intangible tax, we take whatever it is, multiply across, and what do we get? We multiply by 0.002 or 2 mils, and that gives us $62. Are we done? That's our answer? It does match up with A, B, C, or D, one of your choices, but it's not the correct answer because anytime you have a new loan, you have to pay how many taxes on a new loan? 2. So you take that $31,000, plug it in. Is there any amount less than a $100 bill? No, it's already a round number. You multiply across and tell me what you get. I got 108 and 50 cents. Is that what you got? All they're asking us is to calculate the state taxes when you create a new loan. They didn't mention anything about transferring a deed, none of that. So we don't have to do additional calculations that they don't ask us for. These are 3 separate calculations. On your state exam, they might ask you, what's the intangible tax on a new loan? And that's all you had to do is that first calculation, intangible tax on a new loan. In this case, we only had to use 2 of those calculations, add those 2 figures together, and tell me the total taxes that you owe for creation of this new loan. Add those 2 figures and tell me what you get.
Which scenario charges those taxes?
When you're transferring a deed. Yeah, exactly. If there's no loan involved, it's just transfer of a deed, you would only use this calculation. What did you get as your answer? 170 and 50 cents? Is that one of your choices? Does that match up? Letter C. All right, let's see if you got the hang of it. Let's work on 16. A 28.5 acre parcel of land in Orange County sells for $4,100 per acre. What is the documentary stamp taxes on the deed? So this is an example. They're only asking us for the stamp taxes on the deed. And the way to figure that out, the only way is for them to give us the what? I'm pointing to it. The purchase price. Do they just tell us what the purchase price is? No, but they give us enough information to figure it out. It's 28.5 acres, right? And sells for how much per acre? $4,100 per acre. So that gives you how much? 116,850. Is that right? But remember, this is a what type of tax? Stamp tax. And right here, the note on your handout, for stamp taxes, anything less than a $100 bill must be rounded up to 100. So is $50 less than a $100 bill? Yes, it changes this amount to 116,900. And now you multiply by 7 mils or 0.007 and tell me what you get. Do you get 818 and 30 cents? Is that one of our choices? Does it match up with A, B, C, or D? It's letter D. Do you know if you forgot to round, if I were to go back to that handout, if you forgot to round this amount, just because you forgot about this note here, and you left it as is, you multiply across, you would have got 817 and 95 cents. Did they prepare for you making a mistake? Yes, they did. You got to be careful with this. All right, let's take a break. I want you guys to be back at 10:55. 10:55. Stretch out, grab a snack, make a phone call, all that good stuff. Be ready to rock and roll. See you guys. Okay, we're back. Camera's on. Let's jump into Unit 18. Unit 18 is all about taxes, taxes, and more taxes. There's only two things guaranteed to us in life, death and taxes. And taxes when we die, of course, because why not? At insult to injury. On page 406 is where we're going to begin. Let's get an introduction to taxes and just a couple more calculations. Good calculations, homesteading and so forth. If you look on line 6, real estate taxes, property taxes are ad valorem. We saw that in Unit 8. That base, it means the property taxes are based according to the value of the property. The higher the value of your property, the more taxes you will pay. That's the concept behind ad valorem. And who determines what your assessed value is every single year? Yeah, you'll see that specifically. This paragraph is good. Specifically on line 7. And remember, they are establishing the assessed value of your property. That's what they're going to charge you taxes on, not what your property is worth in the current market. That's market value. That's not assessed value. And of course, it's updated annually. Property taxes in Florida are paid on an annual basis. You'll see this on line 11. But at the end of line 11, taxes are paid in what? It says in arrears. Do you see that? At the end of line 11, property taxes are paid essentially, look on line 12, at the end of the tax year. You'll see how that looks on this chart. Let's focus on this chart so you can understand the property tax schedule. Starting January 1st, the tax year begins. You see it right here. Property is assessed, lien is attached, and if you have any exemptions to file, like your homestead tax exemption, you can start January 1st. But what they don't tell you about the homestead tax exemption here is you have to have owned the property prior to January 1st to claim it as your homestead come January 1st. And you have up to March 1st to get your homestead tax exemption or any other exemptions you qualify for into the county so they can adjust your tax bill. So if you close after January 1st, you have to wait till the next year before you can actually get the benefits of homesteading your property. And you don't have to renew it. It's automatically renewed on your behalf unless you change your primary residence, your homestead. November 1st, property taxes for the current year become due and payable. And you have up to April 1st of the next year, write this down, before it becomes what? Past due or delinquent is how they describe it. So what does that mean? That means November 2024 is when property taxes became due, and you have up to April 1st of 2025 to pay it before it becomes delinquent. And we'll talk about what happens at the end of this unit when an individual does not pay their property taxes. They default on the property tax bill. Okay, let's move on to page 408. If you disagree with the proposed property tax bill that you receive in the mail, do you have a right to dispute it? And I mean proposed, not your actual tax bill. Your actual tax bill gets sent to you November 1st. But prior to that, around August, they send you what they're thinking about charging you in property taxes. You have a right to disagree at that moment, but this is the process you have to go through, so we should be familiar with it. It's as simple as ABC. Let's go through ABC together. First step is complain to the county property appraiser. If you're not satisfied, complain to the value adjustment board. And if you're still not satisfied, you take them to what? Yeah, like Disney takes Orange and Osceola County to court every single year to adjust the assessed value of their property. They disagree with it. But you can imagine what 1 acre of Disney property should be assessed at. 1 acre of Disney property, Walt Disney World. Tens of millions? I don't know. I mean, just think about that. So they charge them a lot of taxes. And their reign of terror has come to an end. Thanks to Governor Ron DeSantis. He went after Disney. I don't know if you paid attention to the news and what was going on with that. Disney was their own governing body. When you want to pull a permit for constructing something, you go to the county, you go to the city, the municipality for permission. You have to submit drawings, engineering drawings, and so forth, and they might issue you a permit. But Disney, they would submit plans to themselves and give them themselves the stamp of approval, as long as they had to answer to the EPA. You know who the EPA is, right? Environmental Protection Agency. But that's it. Other than that, anything structural, engineering, and things they want to construct, they didn't have to ask permission. If we continue to page 409, we see a good topic, exemptions to property taxes. What types of properties are immune? Well, look, I'll simplify it. Make it even easier. Look, what types of properties are immune? Government properties. You can give me so many examples of government properties. What about a post office? What about a military base? Public library, not Books A Million or Barnes and Noble, okay? Municipal airport, not a landing strip in somebody's backyard. Might be tested on one of those. And they are immune. That means they never catch the disease of property taxes. All right?
Wow. Choice words.
And what types of properties are exempt? That don't have to pay property taxes either, but they have to file for this exemption. I'll highlight this for you. It's right here on line 9. Yes. 501c3s. Religious organizations. Churches, for instance, they don't have to pay property taxes. They have to register with the IRS, file that exemption. Well, it's kind of an exemption, right? They're exempt properties is how they describe them. My personal opinion has nothing to do with my faith. I think churches and religious-based facilities, temples, whatever it is, they should pay property taxes. That's my opinion. I think most of them are running a business. That's my opinion again. And I think you'd agree with me that if you ever go to nothing about the church, okay, there are churches and facilities that have the right intentions, but they are running a business. So there's no doubt in my mind. They pay staff. So you got to run a business to be able to afford staff. And then also they have schools, a lot of them. And that's another money glitch, I believe. Because if you ever sent your kids to private education at one of those religious-based schools, have you ever paid tuition for one of these schools before? It's not cheap. And they receive that money and they don't pay any property taxes for that facility where why are they charging tuition if that's the case? Oh, so they can pay all their staff, but they make money. There's no doubt in my mind. And they use that money to buy more property, which they don't have to pay property taxes on either. And then you hear stories about pastors buying mansions in the name of the church. You understand? And they're living there, but oh no, we use it for rehabilitation, a retreat in the backyard or something like that. That's why it's owned by the church. It's sad, but
Question,
anyhow, let's
Michael.
move on. Yes.
Quick question. So let's say a church is renting a property from a landlord and they've been there for years. Does the landlord still have to pay real estate taxes? They do.
Yes, they do.
Thanks.
Because ownership has to be in the name
Of
of the
the,
ecclesiastical religious organization or nonprofit.
gotcha.
That's the rule. For the rest of us, we do receive a break, but for what property? Our homestead, our primary residence. We talked about this in a previous unit, if you remember. And I mentioned in a previous unit that we would see later on, now is the day, how you would get up to that $50,000 exemption and might qualify for more. But I also mentioned that you're probably not going to like the reason why you might qualify for more money as discount on your taxes. That's what we're going to see here. Actually, I made a handout for you guys. Made a handout. I put it all in one space for you. Looks like this. I put it all in one place. They're broken down into 3 groups essentially of exemptions that you might qualify for. Let's go through each one together. In the left, at the top, this column, this is the qualifier. These are all qualifiers to determine if you can get the exemption, but it's based on city, county, and what? Yes. Do you remember your tax bill is broken down into those 3 components? Okay. So pay attention here. The first exemption is based off the assessed value of that homesteaded property. So whatever the assessed value is, you don't determine what the assessed value is. The county determines the assessed value, correct? Yep. You don't control this. But if the assessed value is under $25,000, you basically don't pay any property taxes. So that's the first. You get an exemption up to the assessed value. So that means you don't pay. If your assessed value is between 25 and 50, you only qualify for the base exemption of 25,000. That's the base. If your assessed value is between 50 and 75, you get the base of 25,000 across the board. Do you see it? Across the board. But then for city and county, you could get an additional up to how much? 25,000. All right?
How's that determined?
It's based on the assessed value. So imagine if we're talking about city and the assessed value, let's say, is $60,000. What type of exemption do you qualify for? Well, you get the base plus an additional amount of up to what? 25. Well, is your assessed value over 50,000? Yes. So you take $50,000 off, and that means you only pay taxes on $10,000 of the assessed value. So it's not, they don't hand you a $50,000 check, okay? They just take it off the assessed value. That's how it's deducted. If you remember, we mentioned that in the previous unit, but now we see it again. And then for most of our properties, let's just be honest, most of our properties are assessed over 75,000. So for city and county, you do get the maximum initially of how much? 50,000, but school board, you'll notice it stops at the base of what? 25. You're going to be tested on that. Now, let's look at the next set of exemptions that you might qualify for. I mentioned you're probably not going to like this. Unremarried surviving spouses, widow or widower, get an additional how much? 5,000 across the board on top of the 25 to 50,000 that they qualify for initially. If you're legally what? 5,000 across the board. Totally and permanently disabled, non-veteran, 5,000 across the board. Like you're missing a hand or something like this. That's permanent. That's totally disabled when it comes to that body part. If you are totally permanently disabled, quadriplegic. What does quad mean? Quad means 4. All 4 of your limbs are inoperable. In this case, you're totally exempt. You don't pay any property taxes. You'll see that here. Totally exempt. Do you see that? If you're totally disabled as a first responder and their spouses receive this qualification, totally exempt. What is a first responder? Paramedic, fire, police, those are first responders. And then the last is specifically for military. You'll see right here, veterans. If you're a veteran and you can prove at least 10% disability, you get an additional 5,000 on top of the 25 to 50. How do you prove 10% disability? You don't determine, the military determines this. When you go on active duty, they give your body a physical. They assess your body. And when you're discharged, you get something called the discharge physical. And if they find out that through the course of action, serving our country, something happens to one of your body parts, it doesn't function or operate properly, because of, I don't know, hearing, gunshot, explosion, whatever the case may be, God forbid, but you get an additional. Each body part has a percentage, is what I'm saying. How degrading is that? The military puts a percentage on your body parts. So, for instance, a thumb has more percentage than a pinky. You can understand why, but it's still degrading that they put percentages on your body parts. So anyhow, if it adds up to 10%, you get an additional $5,000 exemption. Service connected, totally disabled, and their spouses don't pay any property taxes. And surviving spouses, a veteran who passed away on active duty, don't have to pay any taxes. This is all in your textbook, broken down into 3 parts. I put it all in one place for you guys. You might be tested on what we see on this chart. So you have to spend the time to go through what's on this handout. It just simplifies what's in your textbook. Let's move on. If you go back to your textbook now, what we see in our textbook is what's on our handout. These charts, it's already what we went through. But go to the bottom of page 411. You see tax rates. But what do we need to know? It's actually on page 412. Line 1. This was on another handout that we went through together, right? Tax rates are expressed in mils. That was on your handout. A mil is 1,000th of a dollar. It confirms what's in our handout and what we went through together. So how do you convert mils? Take the millage rate, divide by 1,000. Then you could do your math. Works every single time. What's the maximum mils they can charge you per? You see, no more than 10 mils each. City, county, school board. You'll be tested on this. Class exam question. Hey, we made it. This example is almost exactly what you're going to see on your class exam. Very similar example. Okay. Let's move on to page 414. Get there. What we see here is the Save Our Home Act. This is a benefit for homeowners, for your homesteaded property. Who owns property in here once again? Raise your hand. Your homeowner. When you look at the assessed value of your property, you're looking at it and you're thinking, this is not what my property is worth. My property is worth way more than that. But you're not going to say nothing because you want to make sure they charge you taxes on a lower amount. I get it. It's by design. They know what your property is actually worth. It's called the Save Our Home benefit. They on purpose assess your property at a lower amount as a benefit for being a homeowner. And for your homesteaded property, your assessed value cannot increase by more than how much percent on an annual basis? No more than 3%. That's another benefit. Any questions about this? It's part of our Florida Constitution. Nice. Can we move on? By the way, you can transfer your homestead, and there's benefits that come along with that. I'm not going to get into the calculation of it. I'm just sharing it with you. So if you move your homestead to another part of Florida, just know that transfer it. Don't say, hey, listen, this is no longer my homestead, and then try to file for a new one. You have the option to transfer, do that. Let's move on to the next page. We know that as real estate licensees, we should avoid trying to be a psychic for obvious reasons. Don't tell them, hey, next year you're going to pay X amount of dollars in property taxes. Stay away from that. You can tell them facts, what the current owner is paying. If the bill has been posted in public records, you're going to have access to that information. The Florida Greenbelt Law. A lot of people don't know about this. Highlight this paragraph. This is for farmers. If your land is zoned agricultural and you're using it for agricultural purposes, farmland, which include growing plants, raising animals, whatever the animal's purpose is for. Have you ever seen cows roaming around in a big field with, you're like, what are these cows there for? It's for tax purposes, more than not. Okay, more so than not. Even Disney takes advantage of this. Have you ever been driving a Disney property like next to the Gaylord Palms Resort and you see a big field with a whole bunch of cows? Rather than leaving the land vacant and paying a higher tax, if they put a few cows there, you have to have a certain number of animals per acre or crops per acre. Somebody from the county will come and actually count the sheep, pun intended. Then you qualify and you pay the lowest rate of property taxes, the farmer's rate of tax. Until you're ready to construct on it, then you evict the cows. They were great tenants. They mowed the lawn. They fertilized the ground. They never complain. And then, all the benefits that you get from what they produce. And then you construct. And then you have to pay the new rate of tax based on the property that it's zoned for. Anyhow, let's move on to page 416. Yep, page 416. And then we come across something referred to as special assessments. I made a handout for you guys based on this. It's a little bit of math, not too bad. Special assessment. You asked about this before. Special assessment. Special assessment is a one-time charge within the year for any work that the city or county did to directly or indirectly improve your property. The most common example of when they would charge you a special assessment is for what? Look on line 20. Street paving. Have you ever seen the county come in and repave the streets in front of a property or in a neighborhood or any road? Yes. And if you can recall from the first day of class, most likely the developer dedicated to the county so they don't have to take responsibility for that. But it's not free for the city or county to pave the streets, so it's not free for you as the homeowner. And I'll show you how they charge you for this specific task. Let's use this property here, property A, as an example, lot A. And there's an example on the next page, example 1. Here's the formula on your handout, by the way. Same formula, but let's go through this example. Line 17. The city is paving the streets in a neighborhood. The city will assume 30% of the expense. The city has approved a bid to pave the streets at a cost of $24 per front foot. How much is a special assessment for lot A that measures 100 by 125 feet? I need you to pay attention to me real quick. You need to know something about when they share a measurement for a property with you. It's what they're sharing is the measurements, but it's in a specific order. They always give you the width by the depth. Do we care about how deep that property is? How far back the property goes? No. We care about how much of your property is touching the road where the paving is getting done. This is how you calculate how much you owe. Because the street paving is in front of your property. It's improving your property. Of course, if they repave the street in front of your house, it improves your property, right? And it's not free for them. It's not free for you. Do you see it? The example on the previous page, it's 100 feet by 125 feet. We don't care about how deep it is. How much of the property is touching the road? 100 foot. So let's do the math. Look, I'll walk you through it. Let's go through these steps. It's very basic math. I just want to show you and explain it to you. 100 feet, and the city approved a bid at how much per front or linear foot? $24. So that's $2,400 for 100 feet of street paving. That's expensive. You're thinking, I'm responsible for all of that? No. The city said they're going to cover how much percent of the expense? Look, 30%, which means you pay how much percent? 70%. Do you see that? You take 100%, subtract 30, and you get 0.7 or 70%. And then when you multiply, it's still a lot of money. You're thinking $1,680 on top of my property taxes, what I already pay. We're not done. How many sides of the street are there? There's always two sides of the street. The question I always get is, hey, Michael, if somebody lives across the street, if it's vacant, if we're in a cul-de-sac, it doesn't matter. You only pay half of whatever the street paving expense is because you're half of the street. So you always take it and divide by what? 2. And when you divide by 2, you still get money that you probably are not happy about paying, $840 on top of your property tax bill. Do they charge you this every year? No. It's only for the work they did in the year. If they had to repair a street light in front of your house, they're going to charge you the majority of that expense. It is what it is. So it's only if they did work within the year. Do you have a practice question with this later on tonight? But let's talk about what happens when you don't pay your property taxes. When do property taxes become due? When they become due for the current year? Nope. November 1st. And you have up until April 1st to pay it before it becomes delinquent, past due. You'll see that confirmed for us here. April 1st is April Fool's Day. Yeah, fool on you. All right, delinquent on taxes. What happens? Well, it's something called a tax lien certificate auction. Let me explain it. You're probably not going to be tested on this, but it's important to know. If somebody doesn't pay their property taxes, their property tax bill is going to be sold at auction. And I'll buy it. It's one of the investments I make. Why not? I get notifications because I have a bidders account and it's online. Very competitive. How do you win? Because the $5,000 that you owe in property taxes, let's use that as an example. Let's say you owe $5,000. That $5,000 does not change. Whoever wins pays the $5,000. So how do you win? It's based on the interest that you can earn when you pay that $5,000. That's what you're bidding for. You are bidding to try to get as much interest as you can off of that property tax bill. So the highest amount of interest you can make off of paying somebody's taxes in Florida is how much percent? I highlighted 18%. But it's an auction. How do you compete against another bidder? The next bidder, your competitor, says, I'll be willing to take 16%. I'll be willing to take 15%. And you keep on going down from there. And it's so competitive in Florida that you can go down as far as 0.25%, a quarter of a percent. And investors will still go there because they're thinking, it's better than keeping my money in a bank account. Because eventually these people are going to redeem that tax bill. They're going to pay. And when they pay, they owe the $5,000 as an example that I gave earlier, plus the interest that I won at auction, plus the county fees that they charge, the penalties and so forth. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's guaranteed. Is somebody going to lose their house over $5,000? They'll find some way to get the money, right? Most of the people. If they don't, they have up to 2 years to redeem and pay. If they don't, after 2 years, you can send their property to auction. And it's conducted through something called a tax deed sale. Tax deed sale. See that here. And their actual deed is auctioned off. And the property goes for whatever it goes for. If it sells for $300,000, yeah. For instance, I paid off Gatorland's tax. Gatorland didn't pay on 71 acres of their property. And I paid. I'm surprised nobody else knew what the property was, but I did research. I saw the owner of the property, and I know the last name of the family that owns Gatorland. And I'm thinking, this can't be Gatorland. And then I looked at the size of it, and I looked at the location, and I'm like, okay, 32837. Okay, I know. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bid on it. And I bid. I won. Nobody outbid me, and I got 18%. I got 18%. And they didn't pay for 2 years. So I sent it to auction. You do this through the county, and you got to pay for this. It's a few $100. You send it to auction, and as soon as they got the letter saying it was going to be auctioned off, they paid. And I got reimbursed everything plus the interest plus. Now, something interesting. The question I get is, okay, Michael, when you pay off somebody's taxes through that first auction, what happens? Well, a lien is placed against your property. It's called a tax lien for that reason. And after 2 years, then you can force the sale through the lien. Remember, you have a lien, then you can enforce the lien. And the question I get after that is, okay, can you also attend that auction? When you send it to auction, the property, can you bid on it? Yeah, you can. You just be reimbursing yourself. You understand? But yes, you can participate in that. Let's talk about federal income taxes. This is a good subject because it's not like the nitty gritty of it, but it's the exemptions that you qualify for having a primary residence. What kind of exemptions do you qualify for? Let's go through the first set. Mortgage interest is deductible. Wow. But not just on your primary, also on what? Second homes, including property taxes up to $10,000 on primary and second homes. That's the next benefit. There are rumors that cap is going to be removed, which means you can write off your total property tax bill, write it off completely, which would be nice. Does anybody have like IRA, 401k that they make contributions towards? If you take money out early, do you get penalized? Yes, unless you can prove that money is used for the purchase of your primary residence. It's a deferred program, which means you can take it out penalty free, but you have to recontribute the same amount within a certain time period. But it's like what happened in the Pandy. Like when the Pandy hit, they were allowing people to take money out of their retirement to pay for basic needs, penalty free. Exclusion of gain from the sale of your primary residence. This is very good. This is one of the best deductions that you can claim. If you sell your primary residence and you make a profit is up to how much? For a single person, a single individual. If you're a married couple filing a joint tax return, not separate, double it. $500,000 profit, put it in your pocket. And you're probably wondering, how do you figure that out? Is it what you paid for it and what you sold it for? No, it's more than that. It's what you paid for it, plus all the improvements you've made over the years. And then you subtract that from what you sold it for. What's left over is what you can either claim as a deduction or have to pay capital gains tax on. Check out these two additional tax benefits. Interest on home equity loans is deductible, and points origination fees that you might reluctantly have to pay if you're trying to get a loan. Maybe they say, hey, listen, we charge points, I'm sorry. And this is the only lender willing to give you financing, so you pay the points. At least you know that they're not going to charge you income taxes on that money you spent. You're going to be charged tax on top of it. This is what I just mentioned to you guys. Look, when you sell your primary residence, you want to avoid capital gains tax at all costs. So it's what you paid for the property plus all the improvements you've made over the years. That's the adjusted basis. And that's what gets subtracted from what you sold the property for. What's left over is what they want to charge you taxes on, unless it's your primary residence. $500,000 if you're a married couple filing a joint return. Tax-free money. Put it in your pocket. We have something called FIRPTA, Foreign Investment and Real Property Taxation Act. And IRS, go to page 421. IRS requires that foreign investors withhold 15% of the amount realized on the sale to pay IRS. The IRS wants 15% to make sure foreigners pay their fair share of what? Non-citizens pay their fair share of what? Taxes. Let's continue on. What kind of deductions can you claim on your income tax return, which who knows if income taxes are going to be required in the future, for investment property? Probably they're still going to require corporations to file a tax return, but I think individual tax returns are probably going to go away. I mean, at least that's what's being proposed. So what kind of deductions can you claim for investment property? It's one of the best investments you can make because of all the tax incentives that exist. Basically, write off everything you can. All right? Everything under the sun. Operating expenses. That's a lot right there. Operating expenses. What about property management? Repairs, upgrades, renovations, all of that is a tax write-off. What if you have your own property management company and you're paying yourself? Huh.
It's still salary.
Maybe I'm giving you bad ideas. All right, let's move on. Debt service. Debt service. If you borrowed from a lender to purchase that investment property, interest, points, origination fees, you can write off all of that. You don't have to pay any income taxes on that. And even flipping depreciation. Really? What is depreciation? Just in general. Loss in value. Caused by wear and tear, poor design, the structure, surroundings. How does IRS allow you to deduct depreciation? How do you even figure this out? There's a calculation. Your accountant knows the calculation. Whoever is preparing your taxes, if you have investment property and they're not writing this off, it's crazy. It's one of the best deductions you can get, depreciation. And I'll show you how it works. You're going to be intrigued about this. It's called the straight line method of depreciation. I give you a handout for it. It's one of the last handouts. And it's something you're going to be tested on. Class exam question here. Okay. Actually, I want you to, back on page 422, highlight that paragraph, not just straight line method, but there's relevant information you need to know. It's on the last sentence. You need to know, dedicate this to memory, that IRS establishes the useful asset life of a residential income producing property as 27.5 years and non-residential as 39 years. Let me show you what that means. In the grand scheme of things here, I think we could use a question. Yeah, let's use a question at the end of this unit. Question 1. This is on page 427. Let's go through this together. Question 1. I'll show you how IRS allows you to write off depreciation on your investment property. You're going to like this. Investor purchased an apartment building January for $975,000. The contract specifies that 90% of the purchase price is allocated towards the building, 10% is allocated towards the land. Or no, yeah. Is that right? Yes, towards the land. The investor made a deposit or a down payment of $97,500. That doesn't matter. What's the IRS's allowed annual depreciation on this property? Round to the nearest dollar. So this is how you figure it out. You can keep, do you have the handout in front of you? Let me pull it up. IRS. Right here. Looks like this. IRS's allowable property depreciation. You take the total acquisition cost of the property, you subtract the land. But they made it easy for us in this way. We can do the notes up here. Look, they made it even easier. Rather than telling us how much it was for the building, how much it was for the land, they gave us percentages. They told us the total purchase price was what, $975,000? Okay, so that was the initial cost. And they said, what percentage was the building? 90%. So all you had to do was multiplied by 90%. Why? Let me explain something to you. Depreciation can only be calculated on the building, not the land. I'm not telling you that land doesn't lose value. I'm telling you for depreciation calculations, you can only calculate depreciation on the structure, not the land. So here it is. Allows annual depreciation. Way to reduce tax liability, stimulate the economy. And this is calculated specifically on the building. The building represents 90%. So that will tell us the amount that we need as our depreciable basis, which is what? What's our depreciable basis? 877,500. Can you confirm that? Go ahead and do the math. Take 975,000, multiply by 0.9. Tell me what you get. $975
Yeah, 877.
times 0.9. 877,500. What we just calculated was our depreciable basis. Okay, that's what we need for step number 2, our depreciable basis. The whole purpose of step number 1 is to calculate the depreciable basis. It's calculated on the building, not the land. Subtract the land value from the property cost. Remember, it's on the building. So we take that and we divide it by, look, the property's useful asset life, 27.5 years for residential or 39 years for what? Non-residential. Is an apartment building, in the eyes of IRS, classified as residential or non-residential? In a real life, it would most likely be zoned commercial, income producing, multifamily. However, for IRS, because they know people are using the property to reside in, if it's a business operating out of there, then obviously it will be recognized as non-residential. But because people are residing there, they recognize it as residential. Because, well, first of all, what's the amount of years for residential that you divide by? You divide by 27.5 years for residential, and then you get your result. So you take that 877,500 divide by 27.5, round to the nearest dollar, and yes, we get $31,909, right? 909. That would be your answer. You're probably wondering, why does IRS say that the useful life of residential is less than non-residential? Well, because people are residing there, living there all day long. So there's more wear and tear on the building. Non-residential, people are operating during business hours. So there's less wear and tear. And obviously, they want to make it sure it's presentable to get more business. So they maintain it a little bit more than people that are living in their home. Anyhow, that would be your answer. So what does that actually mean, though? Almost $32,000 depreciation. That's a tax deduction. That means you don't have to pay income taxes on almost $32,000 every single year just because you own that apartment building. It's an income producing property, right? Aren't you collecting rent from the tenants every single month? But at least you know that almost $32,000 of that income you're collecting from all those tenants is tax-free money just because you own it. How wonderful of a deduction. Here's the downside. If you claim depreciation every single year so that you don't have to pay income taxes on $32,000 essentially every single year for 10 years, $320,000, you don't have to pay taxes on any of that. Wow. When you sell it, IRS says you have to add that money back on top of the purchase price so they can charge you taxes on that amount and the depreciation that you claimed over the years. But there's a way to avoid that. And I've been preaching this since day one. And I told them to add it to the book. They finally added it to the book. It's one of the last subjects in Unit 18. It's called the like-kind exchange, also referred to as a 1031 exchange. IRS tax code 1031 is where it comes from. Have you ever heard of this before? I'll show you in your textbook. You're going to like hearing this. IRS tax code 1031. It's called the like kind exchange right here. This is on page 242. If you don't take any profit when you sell that property and roll all of your profits into the next one, you're not charged any taxes on that depreciation that you've been claiming for the past 10 years. 424, yes. But you can't touch the money. You have to hold the money with an approved intermediary, like a CPA, like a lawyer. They're going to hold on to it in their escrow account until you identify the next property that you're going to purchase. And you have to identify the next property within 45 days. That's not in your textbook. And you have to close on that next property within 180 days. That's 6 months. And IRS, as long as you do so, IRS will not charge you any income taxes on all that depreciation you've been claiming over the years. It's wonderful. So investors use this as a tool to constantly grow their real estate portfolio. They buy a property, they rent it out, they get a return on their investment, they reduce that what they initially paid for the property, they sell it, they make profit, they roll that into the next property, a duplex, sell that, roll it into a quadruplex, sell that, roll it into a 10-unit apartment building, and keep on upgrading. And a lot of people are kind of like, okay, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just, why wouldn't you take the money? Why wouldn't you want that money? Not only are you going to be taxed on it, you're going to get less than what you actually think, but also as an investor, you're going to live off the cash flow that the next property is producing. You don't care about the profit when you sell it. You just use that profit so you can upgrade, get another property that's going to produce even more income every single month. And now it's cash flow that you're living off of. Upgrade your cash flow every single time you sell. Anyhow, any questions here? No questions? All right. We do have some things to cover independently, right? Unit 14, 18, do not skip the review questions for these units. But we are done with our session, which means you can push in your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe, God bless. Take these remaining handouts. Use it as practice. Freebies. I will see you mañana.